Hey guys, what's going on? Shah here, and today we're going to be taking a look at Executioner Tarvold, or Executor Tarvold, I think officially is his name in the Dungeon Journal, but we're going to just call him Tarvold, or Big T. A lot of you guys have asked me to cover this boss. It's obviously a pug killer. It's definitely a difficult boss to get down. It's a high DPS check, high healing check, and a pretty decent positional check from the tank's ability to put the group in the right position, because a lot of times where the tank is positioned is where the group's going to be positioned, and if you get hit by a beam or clipped by a beam or get clipped by the ad puddle after it dies, typically it's going to result in a wipe. So I'm going to cover today everything about the boss, from what the damage patterns are to what are the big mechanics you need to look out for, and how to ultimately kill this boss. And hopefully this guide helps, and I hope you guys enjoy. So let's just dive right in. So in this video, I'm actually going to be using something a little different format than what I normally do, just to make things more visible. This time I actually have a tool to draw, so I'm able to point out things to you guys a little bit more clear than I have been just using a mouse and just circling really fast. So if you guys like this, let me know. If it's too annoying, also let me know in the comment section below. So to start, let's just kind of cover what the boss does. So Tarvold is pretty much a mechanic check in a sense. There isn't much the tank needs to worry about when it comes to damage. His melee hits hit pretty hard, but honestly, just making sure you have your shield block up, your iron furs up, making sure you're shuffling and staggering as a monk, and obviously rotating through some minor cooldowns when you need to. Typically, when you want to use minor cooldowns on this fight, things like Barkskin, things like Spell Reflect, are going to be when the ads are alive and up, because not only are you going to be taking obviously melee attacks, but on top of that you're going to be taking pulsating magic damage, which just adds to the damage profile that you're going to be taking in. So you just want to make sure you're staying healthy so the healer can focus on obviously the rest of your group, because keeping them up is going to ultimately get the fight down. Outside of that, really all he does is he spawns ads, these coalesced manifestations that need to die as soon as possible, and he's going to castigate on random party members. It can either go on the healer or DPS, but there are ways you can bait it. I'm going to show you guys in a second how to do that. And the biggest thing about this boss is how you're going to go into the boss. Are you going to have hero up? Are you going to have prideful up? Or are you going to have cooldowns up? These are three big questions you need to approach and answer in your dungeon route. I always recommend having prideful up for this boss, because even on fortified weeks, as you're going to see here, it's going to be pretty scary to get down. This is a grievous week, so that's kind of hard to talk about, because whenever there's a lot of group damage, grievous just amplifies, and it's the detriment that it puts on the group. So you're going to want prideful going into this fight, and more than likely you're going to want hero. There's obviously points in the dungeon you could pull prideful into bigger pulls, especially in the second boss ring, but having it for the second boss is going to just make your run so much smoother. And the other thing is you want to make sure you have cooldowns up. But outside of that, there isn't really much going on. Just like the Grand Proctor, who's the third boss in here, there aren't a lot of mechanics, but they're definitely deadly. So let's go into this video. I'm able to change the speed on this, so we're going to see how this goes. So we're going at normal speed here. So we're going to get a prideful buff right before going into boss, and we are approaching this from a counterclockwise direction in the room. So when we entered this room, I took a right. So I know some groups go left, some pug groups just go left, because it's just, you don't have to, if you're not skipping anything earlier on in the dungeon, you can just go left and you don't have to do weird back pulling. So depending on where you're going to come from is how you're going to pull this boss. So if you pull him coming from the counterclockwise direction, you're going to want to be on this inside lane here. If you're pulling him from the opposite side, which is coming clockwise, you're going to want to make sure you're on this outside wall until the beam passes you, and then you can swap back and forth. So typically what I do is I target this first fleeting manifestation, and I'm going to just Moonfire just to pull the boss. Now, what's cool about doing this is if you run back and you line of sight in the proper way, the big thing here is you're trying to get the boss out of his alcove, which is here. You want to get him outside of his alcove into the ring, but also on top of that, if you notice, he's casting Castigate on me, which is really beneficial for the group, because that means all your melee DPS can just go in and start hitting him, and you can already start using things like Frenzied Regeneration to just keep yourself up. Your healer could heal you or sack you, for example, sack or Barkskin or Pain Sub for this. You typically won't need it because you're not getting meleeed yet. It's just a nice little thing you can do. So again, you have to line of sight back here, and you have to be the first thing he's in combat with. But anyways, we're going to just jump right into this. I'm actually going to slow this down to about 70% speed just so we can kind of follow along. So the Castigate's going on me. I'm going to stand out a little bit, just apply my Moonfire, make sure I'm getting aggro here, and then we're going to start going in and getting some melee damage. Typically about 15 seconds into the fight is when he's going to spawn his first ad, and this is going to be a good time to obviously have hero up, as well as use some of your cooldowns. Now, luckily I play with some really good players, some really good solid DPS who know how to play their class really well. Sometimes pugging, or sometimes, you know, groups who aren't, you know, full clearing mythic are not going to have, you know, the kind of gear that we do and the itemization that we do. So your DPS might be a little bit lower. So something that's worth considering as a DPS, or as, you know, as a group collectively, is rotating cooldowns for each ad. So here we're popping Wild Spirits and Zuen, so two really massive cooldowns that are going to just destroy this ad. And then our Rogue is going to bring a little bit more single target damage, or a little bit more consistent single target damage, so not very bursty. Obviously can put out some burst damage, but not as much as like a Windwalker Marksmanship Hunter. So as soon as you pull, you're going to want to make sure you're going to the side that the beam was on. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. As you can see, the ad just got annihilated. And then as the ad dies, I'm going to start backing up right away, because as you notice here, there's going to be a pretty small pool that's going to spawn. So here's the pool's edge, and we want to give DPS enough room to keep obviously doing damage. We want to give them room over here, you know, behind the boss, and also like range need a spot to stand down this way to make sure that they can get out with Castigate. So you want rooms on both ends of the boss for Castigate to move towards, so you're not clipping each other, and you can still dodge the fleeting manifestations that are floating around the room. So let's get rid of these markers here and keep going forward. So the Castigate's coming out, and this beam is going past on the right hand side. So because this beam is going this way, we now know that we need to be on this side as soon as this beam passes. So I am calling that out typically in my group, you know, going inside outside. We typically refer to this side as the inside, and we refer to this side as the outside of the ring. That's typically how we do it, because when you call left and right, if you're not all facing the same direction, it sometimes gets confusing unless your DPS are like huge brain and they can calculate that if it's a left behind the boss, or it's the boss's left, you know. But typically calling out inside outside is a little bit easier, I found, for my group. Another thing about some of these classes in here, so we have a rogue and we have a hunter who are both able to use some of their toolkit to actually negate the castate damage. So castate works in two ways. Not in two ways, it has two parts of it, right? It has the cast up when it's moving this way on the cast bar, and then it has like a channel down, which is what happens when the cast gets completed, when it moves this way. When the cast is going down is when you can use things like Vanish, Shadow Meld, Feign Death, obviously, you know, invisibility, things of that sort, to actually cancel the cast. If you do it while the cast is still going up, he's going to just recast on another party member. So once the cast finishes and it's a channel, you want to use something to negate that, so immunities and vanishes, just as like a side note. So the beam is going to pass to the right. Once the Castigate goes out and he feigns it, that's when we're going to reposition to this side, and in about 15 seconds the ad is going to come out. During this window, you're just going to try to get DPS and make sure you're in the right position, and your healer wants to make sure everyone is healthy. The melee hits from him are actually pretty spicy in a lot of circumstances, and the most damage you're going to take again is like with those overlaps. So making sure you're using defensives, like bigger defensives, during these overlaps when ads are up, and when he's also meleeing you. Because this beam now went this way, we're going to shift right back over. So as soon as the beam passes you, you're going to want to shift sides. That's kind of the big thing to pay attention to. Now, there's a lot going on in this fight with Castigates and obviously the manifestations, pulsing damage and making sure they're dying, and then when they die, their pools drop. But if you have someone who's calling out these movements, it makes the fight so much easier. I typically always recommend a tank because it's, you know, you're not paying attention to Castigate for the most part, but a ranged DPS is also good at doing this. So a big note here is you have Kidney Shot. Kidney Shot is cool, not because it's like a super short stun that rogues can do all the time, but they can run a talent called Prey on the Weak that makes them take increased damage after they Kidney Shot. So despite this only being a half kidney shot, it's still going to get that damage amp, and that's why he did it at half. It's not because he didn't have enough combo points or because he didn't care. This is calculated for the most part. And honestly, it's like the RNG of combo point generation, which made it probably 3 seconds and not 1 second. So just kind of a side note, if you're running with a rogue or you are a rogue and not running that, make sure you get a kidney shot on the fleeting manifestation because it's going to die so much faster. And there's also a time right before this ad comes out is when you want to start like pooling your resources. So pooling energy, pooling astral power, pooling maelstrom, soul shards, so you can just annihilate this ad as soon as it spawns. So this second ad and third Castigate is going to be probably the scariest overlap in the fight. It's going to happen later on as well, but in most circumstances you won't hit it unless for some reason the boss fight's taking like 4 minutes. But like a 4-minute boss fight, 3-minute boss fight, you're probably going to wipe already. This boss fight should never last that long on Tyrannical or Fortified. It's just, again, it's a DPS check for a reason. This beam is coming. This ad is just spawning, and Dave has Castigate, which is probably the worst case scenario because we have like 3 immunities, and it went on him. So what he's going to do is he's going to actually run out, pop Karma. Karma's going to get damage onto the ad, and we're now going to shift to the right as soon as this ad dies. Now, the reason we're not panic shifting over right away is because the beam just passed us here, and because there's always an overlap, right? The overlaps always happen on either side of the room. We know that this beam is here and here. So we have a good chunk of time before that beam fully rotates around, maybe like 10 seconds or so. So we are making sure we're going to be in a good spot for the Castigate, making sure this ad dies as soon as possible, and then that's when we can start thinking about shifting over. We also have Aura Mastery active here because, again, when the ad is up, and especially when a melee DPS is out and can't do damage, you want to make sure you're living. So as this ad is dying, we're starting to back up slowly, and we're starting to move to this right-hand side or the outside of the ring. And again, this is where positioning really comes into play for tanks, because as you can see, this ring is now here, and I'm dragging the boss to the left outside. And that's because very shortly after this, once I start play again, this beam is going to go by, and the melee need enough room to like run Castigate out once it comes out in about 5 seconds or so. So the beam is going by here now to the left, and we can shift right over because now we know the beam is going to be coming back around in about 8 seconds or so. And then again, you have a very short window where you can just DPS. So we're hoping that this Castigate is going to go on someone who has an immunity. And lo and behold, it goes on Egg. Egg is a paladin. He can just bubble whenever he needs to. So he bubbles here and he runs out just to be safe. For some reason, he does this, which is always a good play. If you have an immunity, and at least not Turtle, because I think Turtle can still apply dots to you, running into that beam isn't going to be a problem if you have like Cloak of Shadows or Bubble Up, because it won't apply the haste curse to you. So he runs out slightly, runs back in, and then now we're going to shift back over to the right, and we're going to call for a tunnel here when this ad spawns. So this is going to be a scary ad. We call the tunnel probably too early. If we wanted to play it safe, we could have killed this ad, but we felt like we had the damage to get this guy down. We had a lot of 1 minutes coming up. We had things like Rapid Fire, and we had things just like General Monk's like cooldowns. So we were able to just pump a little bit of damage into the boss and get the kill here. We still land the kidney shot just to be safe, and we're gonna just pummel damage in this guy. So again, we're on the right hand side. The beam is going by to the left. We're gonna start rotating right, but because we're tunneling, we're not really gonna move. We're hoping that the beam won't hit us. Again, this is always a really scary call to make, and you want to make sure you're doing it when you know you're gonna kill it. Grievous adds a lot here, but we were able to get the kill. Like we knew this week, like we ran Sanguine like 10 times. Like we were just running this dungeon over and over again at like 21, 20, 19 just to like try to get something on our board because we just couldn't get Sanguines done. So we got a lot of experience on this fight. So we knew at this point we had the damage to get this guy down. So the ad just obviously disappears because the fight's over. And that's pretty much how to do that fight. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of format. If you did like content like this, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps the channel out a lot. And if you'd like to see a certain boss next, let me know in the comment section below. So if I did miss anything, let me know. If there's any kind of cool hints and tricks that you know of, also let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to know about them and hear what you guys do to get this boss down. And I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.